Ripple just partnered with a major Korean insurer to explore tokenized government bond settlement. At first glance, it looks like another incremental adoption headline. But if this were really about payments, Ripple would have led with payments, and it didn't. What this reveals is a much quieter shift in where the system is actually being rebuilt. Ripple recently announced a collaboration with Kyobo Life Insurance in South Korea to explore tokenized government bond settlement using its custody infrastructure. The stated goal is to move bond settlement closer to real time, reducing the traditional delay that exists in today's financial system. That sounds straightforward. A pilot? A use case? Another step forward? But the detail that matters is not the bond. It's not even the settlement speed. It's the layer Ripple chose to enter through. Ripple led this initiative through custody. That creates a disconnect, because most of the narrative around Ripple, and around XRP more broadly, has always been centered on payments and movement. Faster transactions, cross-border efficiency, liquidity routing. And yet here, the entry point isn't movement at all. It's control. That difference is subtle, but it changes how this entire story should be read. If you zoom out, it's easy to miss why this matters. Tokenized bonds are already being explored across multiple platforms. Settlement improvements have been discussed for years. On the surface, this fits into an existing trend, but the structure underneath is different. At its core, a government bond is not just a transaction, it is a balance sheet asset. It has to be held, governed, accounted for, and integrated into a broader financial system. And that immediately raises a question that rarely gets asked in crypto discussions. Where do these assets actually live? That is where custody comes in. Before any tokenized asset can move, it has to be securely held. Before it can be traded, it has to be permissioned. Before it can settle, it has to be trusted within a regulatory framework. But institutions don't build systems, starting with movement. They start with the layer that defines ownership. So, when Ripple enters through custody, it is not starting at the end of the process. It is starting at the foundation. In traditional finance, custody is not a supporting function. It is the foundation. Large institutions do not begin by moving assets faster. They begin by ensuring those assets can be held securely, audited, and governed under strict regulatory requirements. This is why custody providers sit at the center of capital markets. They control access, define permissions, and ensure compliance across entire asset classes. Ripple's own positioning reflects this. Their custody infrastructure, built through acquisitions and integrations over the past few years, is designed to support tokenized assets, stablecoins, and institutional workflows. That includes bank-grade custody through Medico, regulated frameworks through standard custody, and integration layers that connect custody to liquidity and settlement systems. So when Ripple leads with custody in this partnership, it aligns with a broader pattern. Not movement first, control first. And once you see that pattern, the bond pilot starts to look like something else entirely. There's another layer that makes this moment more significant. South Korea recently passed legislation establishing the legal basis for security tokens, including recognition of distributed ledger technology as part of the securities infrastructure. The framework is expected to come into effect in the coming years as supporting rules are finalized. That means this is not just a technology experiment. It is happening alongside a regulatory shift that allows tokenized assets to exist within a recognized legal structure. In practical terms, that changes the environment. Before, tokenization was mostly theoretical or limited to isolated pilots. Now, it has a path into regulated markets. So, the timing here matters. Ripple is not entering a fully mature system. It is positioning itself as that system is being defined. And that positioning tends to matter more than the announcement itself. The choice of counterparty also tells you something. Kyobo Life Insurance is not a crypto-native firm. It is a large financial institution managing long-duration assets like government bonds and insurance liabilities. That creates a very different incentive structure. An insurer is not optimizing for speed alone. It is optimizing for risk management, capital efficiency, and regulatory compliance. Its assets sit on the balance sheet for years, sometimes decades. So, if an institution like that is exploring tokenized bond settlement, the focus is not on speculative upside. It is on operational control. That suggests a different entry point into blockchain systems. Not trading, not retail flows, but the management of real financial assets at scale. And that reinforces the earlier shift. This is about where assets are held, not just how they move. At this point, the structure starts to come into focus. Over the past few years, Ripple has assembled multiple pieces that connect directly to this moment. Custody infrastructure through Medico, regulated asset frameworks through standard custody, liquidity systems through its broader platform, stablecoin integration designed for settlement and collateral. Separately, each of these can look like incremental progress. Together, they form a stack. That stack is not limited to payments. It extends into tokenization, asset control, liquidity access, and treasury management. So when Ripple appears in a tokenized bond settlement project, it is not entering from scratch. It is plugging an existing system into a new domain, and that changes how you interpret the move. This is where the title starts to make sense. Ripple did not announce a complete transformation. There was no single moment where the narrative clearly changed. Instead, the shift happened gradually, from being seen primarily as a payments company to building infrastructure that spans custody, tokenization, and institutional finance. This suggests a different role in the system. If custody becomes the control layer, then tokenized assets sit on top of it. Liquidity connects to it. Settlement flows through it. Treasury operations depend on it. In that structure, XRP does not need to be the entry point to still matter. It can emerge later as part of the system once the surrounding infrastructure is in place, particularly if those custody layers need a neutral bridge for liquidity, collateral movement, or interoperability across markets. That is not a confirmed outcome of this specific partnership, but it is a logical extension of how these systems tend to evolve. If this pattern holds, the implications extend beyond Korea. In theory, institutions entering tokenized finance would not begin with payments. They would begin with custody. They would tokenize assets already on their balance sheets. They would integrate those assets into regulated frameworks. And only then would they optimize how those assets move. You can think of it similarly to how companies approached cloud infrastructure. They didn't start by building applications first. They moved their data into controlled environments, and only then built systems on top of it. That sequence would shift the entire narrative around adoption. Instead of asking which blockchain processes transactions faster, the focus would move to which system can safely hold, manage, and integrate real-world assets. In that world, payments become one component inside a larger financial architecture. And the platforms that control that architecture become significantly more important than the ones that simply move value across it. So the current reality is not that Ripple has fully transformed global finance. It is that Ripple is now visibly operating in a different layer of the system than many people expected. A tokenized bond settlement project in Korea may look like a small step, but the way Ripple entered that project suggests a deeper shift in how institutions are approaching blockchain adoption, not from the outside through movement, but from the inside through control. What to watch next is not just more partnerships, but whether this pattern repeats. More custody-led integrations, more tokenized asset frameworks, more signs that the control layer is being built before the movement layer expands. Because if that continues, then the real story is not that Ripple is participating in the system. It is that Ripple is quietly becoming part of the infrastructure that defines it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. As always, this is for educational and entertainment purposes, not financial advice. Make sure you do your own research before making any investment decisions. If this kind of content resonates with you, a like or subscribe is always appreciated. And if you ever prefer shorter companion pieces, I publish focused myth-busting and under-discussed mechanics on T-Bone Crypto Bytes. They're simply added context, not replacements for the deep dives here. You'll find the link in the description.